I always thought family was supposed to be a safety net, a place where you could fall and know someone would catch you. Turns out, sometimes it's your own blood who's holding the scissors to cut that net. My name is Danica Ortega. I'm 34, single, and live in a quirky 2-bedroom apartment above an old record store in Northeast Portland, Oregon. I run a modest but growing interior design studio specializing in vintage restoration, which means I spend most of my days convincing people that avocado green kitchens from the 70s can be chic again. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. Every piece of it. And then there's my Aunt Marisol, my mom's older sister. She's 72, fiercely independent, sharp as a tack on most days, and lives alone in the house she bought with my late uncle decades ago. She calls it her little garden cottage, but it's really a weathered craftsman with chipped teal shutters, a crooked mailbox, and a hydrangea bush that refuses to die, no matter how many Portland winters roll through. Every Saturday morning, like clockwork, I bring her pastries from this little Venezuelan bakery she loves, and we sit in her sunroom drinking way too strong coffee out of mismatched mugs she refuses to throw away. She tells me stories about her youth in Santa Fe, about my mom's disastrous perm in '87, about the time she chased off a raccoon with nothing but a broom and pure rage. It's our ritual. My reset button after a long week. So when things started going wrong, really wrong, I didn't want to believe it. The first time she mentioned her checking account was being weird, I shrugged it off. We joked that maybe her bank app just didn't speak her accent. But then she said she couldn't find her checkbook. A few days later, she mentioned a $400 withdrawal she didn't remember making. I should have paid more attention. But when you love someone, really love them, your brain works overtime to explain away the cracks. Maybe she's just forgetful. She's getting older. She probably misplaced that receipt. That's what I told myself the morning I opened the family group chat and saw my name being tossed around like yesterday's trash. She's always hovering around Aunt Marisol, one message read. Bet she's pressuring her for the house, said another. And then, from my cousin Elena, someone I used to trade secrets with during family barbecues, came the real gut punch. I don't know, it's just suspicious how close she got after Uncle Javier died. I couldn't breathe. I read that thread over and over, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood the tone or that maybe it was a bad joke. But there was no misreading it. They thought I was taking advantage of her. I stared at the screen for so long that my coffee went cold and my legs went numb. I remember setting my phone down, walking to my window, and just standing there, watching the Max train rattle past. How do you prove you're not doing something awful? Especially when the person they think you're hurting trusts you so completely that she's not keeping score. What none of them knew, what no one bothered to ask, was that I'd already been tracking her finances. Quietly. Carefully. Out of love, not suspicion. 'Cause unlike them, I was actually paying attention. I had noticed when Pablo, our cousin who suddenly started visiting Aunt Marisol every week after years of barely showing up for Christmas, began helping her with errands, picking up groceries, walking her to the bank, offering to simplify her bills. He played the good grandson role with such flawless charm that even I questioned my instincts at first. But it didn't add up. Why was Aunt Marisol suddenly anxious about her budget when her pension had always covered her expenses with room to spare? Why was she avoiding certain topics, especially when Pablo was mentioned? She'd say things like, "Oh, I already gave Pablo the cash for that," or "He handled it," with this vague, glazed-over expression. Like she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to reassure me. So I did what any rational, emotionally exhausted niece would do. I started keeping a spreadsheet. Dates. TM withdrawals. Amounts. Any little detail she happened to mention. First it felt paranoid. Like maybe I was betraying her trust. But then I noticed a pattern. Cash coming out in even hundreds, $200, $300, sometimes $500. Withdrawals from locations she physically couldn't have walked to. Multiple transactions made within minutes of each other. And always somehow after Pablo had stopped by. It wasn't enough to accuse anyone. Not yet. but it was enough to make my stomach twist every time I saw his name pop up in her call log. I didn't tell her what I was doing. I couldn't. If I was wrong, I'd be the villain in this story. And if I was right, I wasn't ready to admit that either. But after that group chat, after seeing my name smeared across family gossip like a headline in a trashy tabloid, I knew I couldn't wait for the truth to reveal itself. I was going to drag it into the light myself, even if it meant burning bridges along the way. Because if I didn't protect her, who would? You know what's terrifying? Looking into someone's face and realizing you don't know them at all, despite having grown up around their laugh, their handshake, their stupid inside jokes about your aunt's burnt flan. That's how it felt every time Pablo smiled at me after that chat. Like a mask he'd been wearing my whole life was suddenly starting to slip. He showed up the following Sunday like nothing was wrong, like he hadn't lit a match behind my back and watched me burn. He even brought Marisol fresh mangoes from some farmer's market and kissed her cheek like he was auditioning for sainthood. I sat there, biting my tongue, watching them laugh over morning news, and I wanted to scream. Not because of the mangoes. Not even because of the money. 'Cause he was so good at it. The deception. The performance. And she had no idea. After he left, I pretended I'd forgotten my purse and stayed an extra hour. I offered to clean out her fridge, which let me peek at a few bills she'd tucked into a drawer. One was a notice about her electricity bill, overdue and set to disconnect in 2 days. That stopped me cold. My aunt has never missed a bill. She sets reminders for reminders. She handwrites due dates in a spiral-bound calendar she's been using since 2015. When I asked about it gently, she waved her hand. It's probably a mistake. Pablo's been helping with the payments. Of course he had. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at my ceiling while the train outside rattled past every 20 minutes, thinking about how someone could empty out a woman's savings one grocery trip at a time. And how easily the world would let him get away with it. You see, Pablo wasn't stupid. He was calculating. He knew how to move just below suspicion, how to make the fraud look like confusion. Like poor memory. Like a tired old woman not keeping up with her own finances. And meanwhile, he'd positioned me as the villain. The over-involved niece. The schemer. It was brilliant, really. Sociopathic, but brilliant. So I started documenting everything. I set up an old iPhone on Marisol's kitchen shelf during our coffee chats. Recorded audio mostly, but sometimes caught video when the angle was right. I asked her about things like how often Pablo came over when he helped with errands, how she felt about her bank account. All under the guise of casual conversation. But I knew what I was doing. One afternoon, I mentioned I'd seen her at the grocery store with Pablo a few days earlier. She looked confused. I haven't been to Safeway this week, she said, and tilted her head like she was second-guessing herself. He was using her debit card. She didn't even realize it. That was the first night I cried. Not because of the betrayal, but because of how powerless it made her. How she blamed herself. I remembered her from when I was a little girl. Sharp-tongued and loud-laughing, always the first one to defend someone or raise hell when she felt wronged. Now she was apologizing for things she didn't even do. I had to make a decision. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. I needed evidence. Not just suspicion and spreadsheets. Real, hard proof. So I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 6 years. Landon Moore. He's an old college friend who now works in digital forensics. The last time I saw him, I was drunk on boxed rose at a backyard wedding, screaming at a broken popcorn machine. Not exactly my proudest moment. Till I texted him. Hey, weird question. Can you help me figure out if someone's been skimming money from my elderly aunt? He responded 4 minutes later. Are we talking accidental Venmo confusion or white-collar crime in a cardigan? I typed. Door number 2. He met me that Friday at a cafe in the Pearl District and looked over my notes. My logs. screenshots of bank statements, even audio clips. After an hour of quiet scrolling, he looked up and said flatly, "Yeah, this guy's siphoning her. Probably for months. You just haven't caught the big withdrawals yet." My throat closed. I'd been hoping I was wrong. That maybe I'd let my paranoia get the better of me. That somehow this was all a misunderstanding and Pablo was just incompetent. But Landon's tone left no room for doubt. "He's careful," he said, "but not perfect. There's a digital footprint here. He's either forging her logins or walking her through ATM withdrawals and pocketing the cash. Either way, he's laundering it slowly." That night, I drove home gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached. Pablo wasn't just stealing money. He was stealing trust, security, sanity. And worst of all, he was doing it with a smile on his face and a family full of people too lazy or too proud to question it. But I wasn't going to stay silent. He thought he was the only one playing a long game. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. You'd think when you discover someone is stealing from your elderly aunt, your next move would be to tell the rest of the family, rally support, bring the hammer down together. But here's the thing no one tells you about family. It doesn't matter how right you are if you're the wrong person saying it. I found that out the hard way. The next Sunday, I showed up to Aunt Marisol's with a fake smile and a real plan. I had a burner phone in my bag, hidden camera glasses, a USB drive with every statement Landon helped me pull. I had printouts. I had timestamps. I had evidence. I also had hope. Stupid, fragile hope. Because despite everything I'd already seen, the withdrawals, the chat messages, the overdue bills, some part of me thought, if I just show them the truth, they'll believe me. I didn't even get past the living room. Pablo was already there, leaning against the kitchen counter with a smug little smirk, sipping from Aunt Marisol's favorite floral mug like he owned the place. "Oh, look who finally showed up," he said. "Thought maybe you'd given up your babysitting gig." I smiled tightly. "Just wanted to make sure you hadn't emptied the fridge along with her checking account." A beat of silence. His eyes narrowed just for a second. Then he laughed. "You've always had such a dark sense of humor, Danica." He turned to Aunt Marisol. "You hear her? Always so dramatic." She chuckled, distracted, flipping through a mail pile. She didn't hear half of what we were saying. Or maybe she just didn't want to. That moment, that was when I realized he wasn't scared of me. Not even a little. 'Cause he thought no one would ever believe me over him. Later that evening, after Pablo left, kissing her forehead like a freaking Disney prince, I tried to bring it up gently. I told her I'd noticed some odd charges on her statements, some large withdrawals, that I was worried someone might be taking advantage of her. She froze. Her voice, when she answered, was soft but sharp. "Danica, I hope you're not suggesting that Pablo would do something like that." "I'm not suggesting anything," I said carefully. "But you've said yourself you don't remember making these withdrawals. You told me last week." "I know what I said." Her tone stiffened. "And I know Pablo's been helping me more than anyone lately. Don't you dare try to drive a wedge in this family." That hurt more than I was ready for. Not because I needed her approval, at least that's what I told myself, but because she was choosing him, the thief, over me. The next few days were a blur of numbness and spreadsheets. I buried myself in work, editing photo mock-ups for a client's 1920s farmhouse renovation while mentally replaying every word Marisol had said. "Don't you dare try to drive a wedge." Like I was the one breaking something. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Elena texted me. One line. "I think you need to back off." No greeting. No preamble. Just a warning. I stared at the screen in disbelief, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. "So now you believe him too?" The typing bubbles popped up, then disappeared, then popped up again. Finally, she responded. Look, I don't know what your deal is, but this obsession is getting weird. Maybe take a step back before you make a scene you can't undo. I laughed. Out loud. A dry, humorless sound that startled even me. Make a scene? He was draining our aunt's life savings, and I was the problem because I wasn't being polite about it? That's when I decided I wasn't just going to catch him. I was going to expose him. Publicly. Not out of spite. Okay, maybe a little out of spite, but mostly because nothing else would make them see the truth. Not quiet whispers. Not spreadsheets. They needed to see him in action. So I called Landon again. Hey, I said. Is there any way to set up real-time tracking on her account? Something that alerts me if money moves? He hesitated. That's not exactly legal unless she gives consent. And if she doesn't? Another pause. Then a sigh. Then it's between you and your conscience. I swallowed hard. My conscience? It had been screaming for weeks. But my aunt's silence? My family's blindness? Pablo's arrogance? That was louder. So I said, set it up. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes when you stop hoping people will do the right thing on their own. It's cold. Sharp. But it's clean. Sir Landon installed the tracker on Aunt Marisol's account, discreetly, remotely, with the kind of digital finesse that made me wonder if he'd ever worked for the CIA. I waited. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my closest friend, Micah, who's known me since freshman orientation and once helped me superglue my bed frame back together after a breakup rage clean. I kept it quiet because I knew how this had to play out. If I wanted to win, I needed undeniable proof. Not just suspicion. Not family gossip. Not even Marisol's confused memory. I needed something no one could unsee. Took 4 days. 4 days of silence. 4 days of pretending everything was fine. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon while I was consulting with a client about velvet wallpaper and brass hardware, I felt the buzz in my pocket. A push notification from the tracking app. $600 withdrawal, Pioneer Bank ATM, 3:17 p.m. The location? Nowhere near Marisol's house. Nowhere she could have walked. And I knew for a fact she hadn't taken an Uber. She hadn't left the house all day. I'd installed a discreet Ring camera facing her front walk just the week before. She hadn't stepped outside. But someone else had used her card. I excused myself from the meeting, ran to my car in the pouring rain, and pulled up the security footage on my phone. There he was. Pablo. Letting himself in with his own key, one I didn't even know he had, 20 minutes before the ATM withdrawal. He stayed inside for about 15 minutes. Long enough to say hello, crack a few jokes, and borrow her debit card like it was his own. Then he left. By the time I hit play on the ATM camera footage Landon had somehow acquired, don't ask, my hands were shaking. There he was again. Hoodie pulled up, head down but clear as day. Inserting the card. Pulling out the cash. Pocketing it. Like he'd done it 100 times. Maybe he had. I sat there in my car with the heat running and rain pounding on the windshield, staring at the screen and whispering to myself, "You're going down." Not in a petty way. Not in a gotcha way. In a justice is coming kind of way. That night I didn't sleep. Again. But this time I didn't cry. I planned. Step 1, confront him. Privately. One chance. Give him the rope to hang himself. Step 2, if he denied it, and I knew he would, I'd go public. With everything. The footage. The logs. The stolen money. Step 3, take it to Marisol. Not gently this time. Not wrapped in care and doubt. Just the truth, plain and ugly. The next day, I invited him to coffee. I said I needed help with something for Marisol, and he didn't even hesitate. Of course he didn't. He thought he'd won. We met at a quiet cafe near Alberta Street, the kind of place with reclaimed wood counters and tiny succulents in mason jars. He showed up in sunglasses and a Patagonia jacket, looking like someone who listened to too many TED Talks. "Always good to see you, cuz," he said with a grin, sliding into the booth across from me. "So, what's up?" I smiled. Calm. Controlled. And then I pulled out the tablet. Pressed play. The ATM footage played in silence between us, the little screen glowing between our coffee cups. He didn't move at first. Then he leaned back slowly. "Okay," he said, voice smooth as silk. "That looks bad." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You think?" He shrugged. "Look, you know how tight things have been lately. I've just been borrowing a little here and there. I was gonna pay her back. She's not hurting. And she trusts me. Does she know you've been helping yourself to over $5,000 in the last 4 months?" That got him. A flicker of fear. I leaned in. "I know everything, Pablo. Every withdrawal. Every purchase. I have it all. And I'm giving you one option, you confess. In writing. You return every cent. Or I go nuclear." He stared at me, that mask of his slipping just an inch. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I would." I slid a printed copy of a notarized repayment agreement across the table. "This is your lifeline. Sign it, or the next time you see your name, it'll be in a police report. Or better yet, on every social feed our family shares." He sat there frozen, the edges of his confidence fraying. "I'll give you 48 hours, I said, standing up. "After that, you better hope Aunt Marisol forgives easier than I do." As I walked out of the cafe into the drizzling rain, heart pounding, breath tight, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not yet. I didn't expect him to sign it. I hoped he would. But deep down, I knew Pablo wasn't the type to admit guilt unless a camera was rolling and the FBI was knocking. So when 48 hours passed and I hadn't heard a word, I wasn't surprised. I was ready. By then, I had compiled everything into a tidy, terrifying little file folder. Security footage, audio clips, digital logs, account statements, even the repayment contract he'd refused to touch. I sent it all to Elena. No message. No context. Just the evidence. Took her 6 minutes to call me. "What the hell am I looking at?" Her voice was shaky, clipped. "You're looking at Pablo," I said. "The real one. Not the charming version who brings your kids gift cards and tells stories about how hard he's hustling. The version who's been stealing from our aunt and blaming me for noticing." There was a long pause. Then, "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" I almost laughed. "Would you have believed me?" Another pause. "No," she admitted quietly. "I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to. 'Cause within 24 hours, it all started to unravel. The group chat blew up first. One by one, family members began pinging each other. Someone forwarded the ATM video. Another added the spreadsheet. Screenshots circulated like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone had questions. Everyone who once thought I was too involved or jealous or controlling now wanted my version of the story. And as the messages poured in, "Is this real? How long has this been happening? What can we do?" I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, power. Not because I wanted it, but because I'd earned it. Pablo, on the other hand, stayed silent. For 2 whole days, he vanished. No messages. No calls. Not a single word in the family thread he used to dominate like a stand-up comic in a living room. Then the silence broke. He posted a long, dramatic message. "I know a lot of things have been said about me in the past few days. It's been hard watching people I love turn on me without hearing my side. I made some mistakes, yes. But this witch hunt isn't helping anyone. Witch hunt. Right." He called stealing thousands from an elderly woman who trusted him a mistake, like he'd spilled orange juice on her carpet. And of course, some people rallied. "You're still family. Let's not air this in public." We all make mistakes, P. I stared at the comments, disgusted. The damage control had started. He wasn't sorry. He was cornered. The worst part? Aunt Marisol still hadn't said a word. She hadn't called me. She hadn't texted. She'd gone quiet. Too quiet. And that silence haunted me more than anything Pablo could have posted. So I drove to her house. No warning. No pastries. Just me, a rain-soaked hoodie, and a folder full of truth. She was in her sunroom, staring out the window like she'd aged a decade in a week. She didn't look surprised to see me. "Danica," she said softly. I sat across from her, heart pounding. "You've seen it." She nodded. Slowly. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered. "I thought maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was being dramatic. But now, I feel like such a fool." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're not a fool. You trusted him. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human." She was quiet for a long time. Then, without looking up, she said, "Do you think I should press charges?" I didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't just about law. It was about family. About betrayal. About what it does to a person when someone they raised turns around and empties their wallet with a smile. "I think," I said finally, "you should do whatever will let you sleep at night again." Her eyes filled with tears. Not angry ones. Not dramatic ones. Just tired, aching tears. "I don't want revenge," she said. "I just want it to stop." I nodded. "Then let's make it stop." And we would. Even if it meant losing pieces of our family in the process. A week later, I posted the video. Not the security footage. Not the spreadsheet. Not the legalese Landon helped me draft. Just me, sitting on Aunt Marisol's faded floral couch, speaking directly to the camera. I kept my voice calm, my face steady. And I told the truth. I didn't name Pablo, not directly. I didn't have to. Anyone who'd been in that group chat, who'd seen the screenshots, who'd quietly believed the worst about me, they already knew. I talked about how easy it is for someone to exploit an elderly relative under the guise of help. How slow financial abuse is. How invisible it can seem until it's not. And I talked about my aunt. Not just what she'd lost, but who she still was, independent, proud, capable. Till all there. Till her. And how betrayal hurts even more when it comes dressed as care. I ended the video with one sentence. If you love someone, you don't borrow from them without asking. You don't lie. And you sure as hell don't make them feel like they're losing their mind just because you think they won't catch you. Then I hit post. I didn't expect it to go viral. But it did. Within 48 hours, it had over 40,000 views on TikTok and 3,000 comments, most from strangers, many from people sharing their own stories. People whose grandmothers, uncles, parents had been manipulated and robbed by people they trusted. The most common phrase? "Thank you for saying this out loud." I was flooded with messages, some from old friends I hadn't talked to in years, others from people I didn't even know. I got tagged in articles. A podcast asked me to speak about elder financial abuse. Someone even started a GoFundMe to help Marisol rebuild what was stolen, though I shut it down gently before she ever saw it. I didn't need strangers' money. I needed them to see her. To see what had happened. And to understand that this wasn't a private family matter. It was theft. It was gaslighting. It was a crime. And Pablo? He spiraled. The minute the video took off, he texted me a flurry of messages. "Take it down. You've made your point. This is slander." I ignored them. Then came the call. He sounded tired. Shaky. Like someone who'd finally realized the house of cards he built was collapsing in public. "You're ruining my life," he said. I stared at the ceiling and breathed in deeply before answering. No, I said. You did that all by yourself. He went quiet. Do you think I wanted this? I continued. Do you think I enjoyed making that video? Watching our family turn into a war zone? You could have stopped all of it. You had a chance. I gave you one. You spit on it. More silence. Then he asked, so quietly I almost missed it, what do I do now? I waited. Pay her back, I said. Sell your car, pick up 2 jobs, move in with your parents, I don't care. But you don't get to pretend this never happened. Will you take the video down? I paused. I could have said yes. Instead, I said, when every dollar is returned and you write her an apology she actually believes. And then I hung up. Because some people don't deserve your closure until they've earned your silence. The days that followed were strange. A mix of relief and fallout. Some cousins stopped talking to me entirely. Others messaged in secret, saying they supported me but couldn't get involved. One uncle even suggested I'd humiliated the family. I didn't care. Because Marisol, my aunt, the woman who once chased raccoons with a broom and never let a single holiday pass without hand-wrapped tamales, was safe again. Her accounts were locked down. Her lawyer was involved. Her money was being tracked. And most of all, she believed me. That was everything. One morning, she handed me a pale yellow envelope. Inside was a short handwritten note. It read, "You were the only one who didn't look away. That means more than you'll ever know. Thank you. Marisol." I cried on the back porch where no one could see me. Because after all the anger, all the sleepless nights, all the shouting into silence, I'd done what I set out to do. I saved her. And maybe just a little I saved myself too. It's funny how quiet life gets after a storm. Not the kind of quiet that feels like absence. Kind that feels like peace. Aunt Marisol still calls me every Sunday morning. Sometimes we talk about the garden. She's started growing basil in mason jars on her windowsill. Sometimes she tells me stories I've already heard, and I let her repeat them anyway. We don't talk about Pablo anymore. Not really. He ended up signing the repayment agreement 2 weeks after the video went viral. Not out of remorse, at least not the kind that changes a person, but because public shame does what private appeals can't. He's paying her back in monthly installments now. Court enforced. Quiet. Sterile. The way all consequences feel when they come late. He moved across town. Deleted his socials. Vanished from the group chats he used to dominate. Some family members still wish I'd handled it more delicately. Others, the quiet ones, the watchers, have pulled me aside at gatherings and whispered, "You did the right thing." And I know I did. But I also know what it cost. You don't expose someone like that and come out the other side untouched. There's a version of me from 6 months ago who still wanted everyone to get along. Who thought justice could be gentle, that truth could whisper instead of shout. I miss her sometimes. But I don't want her back. Because what I've learned is this: there is nothing gentle about watching someone you love get used. There is nothing kind about silence when it's protecting the wrong person. And family? Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. Who listens. Who fights for you even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. I don't regret calling it out. I regret how long it took me to believe what I was seeing. These days I sleep better. Not because everything is fixed or perfect or fair, but because I showed up. I stood between someone I love and someone who thought they'd never get caught. And I didn't flinch. If I could go back and tell myself one thing at the beginning of all this, it would be this: you're not crazy. You're just the only one who's paying attention. And sometimes that's what makes you the villain in their story, until the truth writes you back in as the hero.